Yesterday, Donald Trump signed an executive order to begin construction on the border wall that he promised he would build throughout his campaign. At all of his rallies, speeches, and debates, we heard about the illegal immigration and drug trade happening across our southern border with Mexico. Time and time again, Donald Trump was asked how he was going to fund the construction costs for the wall, and every time he stated that Mexico would be paying due to the high trade deficit caused by the North American Free Trade Agreement. He had a scheduled meeting with Mexican President Enrique Nieto for the 31st of January, next week. Today, however, the Mexican president tweeted that he is canceling his meeting with President Trump and will in no way be paying for the wall. In response, the White House and President Trump stated that they have come up with an alternative plan to fund the wall, imposing a 20% tax on all Mexican trade with the United States, and which raising a very controversial discussion. Is the president seriously considering imposing a tax on trade with Mexico, or is this just a threat to the Mexican government to force them into doing what Donald Trump wants? Today, ladies and gentlemen, is January 26th, and this is the Maverick Report. We're back to the wall again, aren't we? One of the biggest push topics throughout the entire campaign of Donald Trump, throughout his entire campaign, it was brought up time and time again at all of his debates, all of the rallies, all of the speeches, and it's one of the big things that the media covered a lot. You know, how are we going to pay for the wall? What's the wall actually going to do? Is it worth the money we're putting into it? You know, is it actually going to be effective whatsoever? And yesterday we got that answer, if Donald Trump was going to be building it or not, through an executive order. Yesterday afternoon, Donald Trump signed the papers to force the executive branch into beginning construction on a border wall on our southern border. Economists still don't know what the cost of the wall is going to be because plans are still being made in construction, and we don't know what the cost is going to be yet, but it doesn't matter how expensive it's going to be because there's a point where we have to understand that it's going to cost a lot of money, and the question has always been raised is who's going to pay for it. So throughout his campaign, he kept saying that Mexico was going to be paying for the wall, and multiple times the Mexican government stated that they wouldn't be paying for the wall, and Trump just said he was going to force them to, and nobody knew how. He wouldn't go into detail on it, and today we finally got a final statement from the Mexican government saying that no such way they were going to be paying for the wall, and they've canceled their meeting with the president, which was going to happen next week. So White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer came out, and he talked about how our trade deficit with Mexico was one of the main reasons that Donald Trump was going to be attempting to enforce them to pay for it in the first place. And we have a trade deficit of $50 billion, with Mexico each year. And Sean Spicer wants to tax this trade deficit 20%, so all the incoming raw materials and goods coming into the United States each year will be taxed, and that tax will result in $10 billion a year. Now, Donald Trump plans to use this tax to pay for the wall. And, it's a very controversial issue. Like I stated in the intro, he's either going to be enforcing this tax or just using it as a threat. And either path is very different. So we're going to talk about enforcing the threat first. Sean Spicer stated, and I quote, "By doing it, that we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall just through the mechanism alone. That's really going to provide the funding." So that's just him reinforcing the fact that by just taxing the trade deficit with Mexico, we will be paying for the wall. But that doesn't take into the account that all of the Mexican businesses, all of the businesses we get our raw material from in Mexico that are shipping things across the border, they're going to be decentivized to trade with us because they won't be making as much profit when they make business dealings with people here in the United States when they send their raw materials across. So that trade deficit is not going to result, or the 20% tax on the trade deficit is not going to be resulting in $10 billion a year after a couple of years. Plus, we don't know exactly how much the wall is going to cost. So by their logic, they think maybe 2 years of trade taxing will equal $20 billion, will pay for the wall. But what happens when less people trade and you get less of a tax? It might take more than 2 years of taxing just to get the money to build the wall. And also, we don't know how long it's going to take to build the wall. Is it going to be, half a year, a couple years, months? We don't know how long it's going to take. The U.S. hasn't done anything like this in a long time, and it's a very long wall. I'm pretty sure it's over like 600 miles, or I'm not sure. You can't quote me on it, but it's just a very long distance for the wall to be built. And the U.S. government has never done anything like this before in its history. All right. So the other quote that Sean Spicer, that I have from Sean Spicer and his press secretary, the press secretary Sean Spicer that I have from his meeting at the White House, he said, "If you tax that $50 billion at 20% of imports, which is, by the way, a practice that 160 other countries do, right now our country's policy is to tax exports and let imports flow freely in, which is ridiculous." This is a really bad statement. This is a really bad reason for them to be giving for taxing imports. Other countries do it. Just because other countries do it doesn't mean that it's good. You can't justify doing something bad just because somebody else is doing it. That's like saying that man murdered somebody, so now I'm going to go murder somebody else. It's just not justified, and it's not going to lead to economic growth whatsoever. If you tax imports, businesses here aren't going to be able to ship the raw material in to produce products that we need and that they sell. So basically by doing this, you're making it more expensive for companies to operate here. It's more expensive for companies to operate here, and it's going to incentivize them to build factories elsewhere. So this is terrible. It's a terrible idea. That's why I'm hoping that they go down the other path and just use it as a threat. We shouldn't follow through with this. And Donald Trump needs to get that meeting with the president of Mexico. We need to be able to talk this out. We need to find a solution. And I think that the American people should be paying for the wall, not the Mexican government. And I'll explain my reasoning behind that. The government wastes billions of dollars a year, and we're already seeing President Trump starting to clean out the government. He's already froze federal hiring, and he's going to be doing a lot of things in the future. And I think he should go to Congress and try and liquidate the funds throughout the entire government to be able to pay for the wall. We've already seen an $800 million budget reduction in the EPA alone, and if you go through all the other departments, there's tons of money that's being wasted every year. I mean, today he got rid of 3 of the State Department. I think it was more than 3. It was a couple, it was several of the State Department management teams because they were useless. They're not doing a job that we need to be doing. They're just wasting time and doing things that other people could be doing. Like I said in one of my other videos, we need to be cleaning out the entire government. It's draining the swamp. We need to be getting rid of all the employees that aren't doing anything, and we need to stop government waste. Because to be able to spend, and do things like spend taxpayer money and do things we need to do that Trump wants to do, we shouldn't be raising the budget by implementing more tax. We should be keeping the budget at its point, or even lowering it some more. And we need to stop overspending, because right now we have a deficit. We're at a deficit. We spend more each year than the money we have. So we need to get rid of that deficit. We need to lower the amount we spend and lower taxes, because what's happened in the past is every time the government overspends its budget, it raises taxes above it so it can compensate. And now we've gotten to a point where it just keeps going up every year. That's why the United States debt is so high. It's at over $20 trillion. It's doubled since Obama because he keeps raising government spending and raising taxes, which is just not a solution to anything. It's gonna stint economic growth, and it's not gonna allow the country to increase an economic capacity whatsoever. Trump imposing this tax is honestly the complete opposite of the platform he ran on in his campaign, which was lowering taxes, lowering government spending, and now he turns around and wants to raise taxes, and who's it going to hurt the most? It's going to be the American businesses who are importing products from Mexico to create stuff that they sell. So he's all over the board here. I'm not saying he's a liar, but I'm just saying that I don't think he really understands the own economic policy that he operates for, that he values. And he needs to get in a fixed location, because he's using bullying tactics. We've seen it. We saw it with Carrier, and we saw it with a couple of the other deals that he made during his president-elect term, or the time he was president-elect. And bullying tactics to keep companies here in the country are not good. And it doesn't matter who's doing them. This is the problem that a lot of people that support him have, that they justify everything he does just because it's him doing. Bullying tactics weren't good when Obama did them to get companies to do what he wanted to do, and they're not good now when Trump's using them to get countries and countries now and companies to do what they want to do. We shouldn't be forcing Mexico into paying for this wall if they don't want to. There's no legislation to be had here. We're not the EU, and we don't have any mandatory regulations or mandatory deals with Mexico. They're not going to be building a wall for no reason just because we have a trade deficit with them. And I honestly think that if Trump wants to build the wall, like I said earlier, he needs to liquidate funds, lower taxes at the same time, lower government spending, and find the money somewhere else. You've got teams of analysts and economists that you could just use at your disposal, and he has. But the plan they've come up with taxing importing products across the border is just ridiculous. So at this point, we can only hope that this is no more than a threat to the Mexican government and that no tax will actually be imposed. Return for the next episode of the Maverick Report and subscribe to keep updated on everything important going on in U.S. politics.